Away, Donhe. Bill Fenton, Jaje Abrin. Good morning, or hello. Bill Fenton is my name. I am from the Osage Nation. I'm the IT director, and I'm here to share our broadband story that the Osage Nation has been going through for several years now. This is not the right way necessarily, or the wrong way, or this is just the journey that we've had. I would really like for this to not necessarily just be me giving you a presentation. I'd like it to be interactive. If you have questions along the way, please ask. I'd love to have discussion. And I don't know how long it's going to take, so if we get done early, I'm sorry, or you're welcome, depending on your point of view. So some of the things that we're going to go over, my introduction, my background, what makes the Osage Nation unique, the dream that we started with, feasibility studies. I'll just go through this real quick. You can look at this later because I think they have the presentations that are going to be online. Our first projects, the CARES funding, when CARES Act came through, our thoughts when the ARPA, NTIA, and USDA grants that have recently came out last couple of years, and where we're going, how we're using broadband to create jobs, and then the future that we're looking at. Like I said, my name is Bill Fenton. I am an Osage member. I'm also the director for the IT department. I spent 20 years in the Navy. I worked in nuclear power, which obviously is not IT. But once I retired from the Navy, I went to work as a contractor for the Information Warfare Center in San Diego. I spent 10 years there as a contractor doing some SharePoint development and also process improvement type stuff, which I got into at the end of my naval career. From there, I had always wanted to get back to my roots, learn about my culture. I grew up outside the culture. I grew up in San Antonio, Texas. My family never went to Oklahoma. We never went to the tribal lands. We never participated in anything tribal. So I've always felt a hole in my life that I wanted to fill. And so I met our chief and people running for election when they came out to California, and I thought, this is my opportunity. And I asked the chief, hey, you guys need anybody to do something, let me know. He said, well, you got to go to the website, you got to apply. So I did that, and I became the operations manager for the IT department. I was the operations manager for about 2 years, and then our director left, and so they moved me up into the director's position. So I've been the director for a little bit over a year now for the IT department. And throughout all that, we started, they were already going through part of our journey for broadband because they started doing the RUS grants back in like 2015. Get into kind of about the Osage people. I tell people, that I'm Native American, and they start laughing at me. And then I tell them I'm Osage, and they give me a really perplexed look, and I was like, well, yes, I'm not Cherokee, I'm Osage. And if you look at that little blue spot, that's Osage County. Our original lands, we started out in the Pennsylvania area, and then we came down the Ohio, down to the Mississippi, and the Osage were part of the Diega tribes, which is the Osage, Quapaw, Omaha, Ponca, and Kaw. And the Osage ended up settling, and we had most of Missouri, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. Those were our ancestral tribal lands. From there, I'll go back, maybe. From there, we moved when the Cherokee came up through the Trail of Tears, they moved us up into Kansas, and that's where we were settling. We owned the land that we had in Kansas, and then the government moved us from Kansas back to Oklahoma, which is where our current tribal lands are in that blue square. But when they moved us, we bought the land because we had sold our land in Kansas, so we bought our tribal lands. As far as I know, we were one of the only nations that did that. So when the government went to go to allotment, we did not want to do it. And we said, no, the tribe owns this land. The Osage people did not believe in individual ownership of land. So we gave pushback, and finally realized that we were not going to be able to prevent it from happening. So the chief at the time said, okay, well, we will go to allotment, but the tribe keeps the mineral rights. So we keep the mineral estate. So that's a thing that makes the Osage people a little bit unique, is that the tribe owns the mineral estate. So when we went to allotment, there was about 2,200 tribal members at the time. Each one of them got a share, what they call a head right, of that mineral estate. And it was a blessing and a curse for us, and I'll get into that a little bit. This talks about our move that I just talked about, and where we finally went to allotment. We kept the mineral estate. So at the time, the government said, yes, you can keep the mineral rights because the land that you have is all rocky. It's not good farmland, so we'll let you keep the mineral estate. And we kept it, and then they struck oil. So at that time, which was about 1910, 1920, there were more millionaires per capita in Osage County than the rest of the world, because we got a ton of money from the mineral estate and the oil money that they were getting. So you may have heard of the book, The Killers of the Flower Moon. There's a movie that's coming out based off of the book, Killers of the Flower Moon, that Martin Scorsese is the director of. It's got Robert De Niro in it, and who else can I name drop? Leonardo DiCaprio is in it. So it's going to be a pretty big production coming out. The reason I bring this up is because really all this stuff that I've been talking about with the mineral estate and the stuff that happened in the book Killers of the Flower Moon, and I'll tell you a little bit about that in a second, it's all really about land, right? And that's what we're here is at a land conference, and this really, it was about land. It was about people trying to get our land. Once we went to allotment, right, then it's easier for people to come to a single Osage member and purchase that land from them or get it in some way, shape, or form, right, than it is when you come to a tribe. Does that make sense? So, and so once we struck oil, we all had these, and the original Latis had the mineral rights, the head rights. What would happen is people would marry in and then get the head right left to them, and then they would kill the Osage, and then they would have the mineral estate in the land, and they would get the head right from then on. So there was a lot of Osages that lost their lives during the 1920s, which they call the Reign of Terror, and basically it was a big land grab. Doesn't have a whole bunch to do with broadband, but it does have to do with land and our land story. So as far as our broadband story, it all started with a dream, because we know that almost everything today runs off of some kind of IT, right? Farming, medical, everything. Well, I don't know about where all you come from, but I moved from San Diego to Pawhuska, Oklahoma, and never realized that not only do we have food deserts in the world or in the nation, but we also have technology deserts. And Osage County is a technology desert. If you try to get AT&T internet, the max you can get in Osage County is 5 meg. I mean, has anybody ever been a gamer? Have you ever tried a game off of 5 meg? It's not much, right? Those are not very good internet speeds. So knowing that this is the foundational piece to bringing up our people and our area, we wanted to do the best we could so that we don't die, right? Because if you don't have the infrastructure and the resources, then you just slowly start to die off and nobody moves in, everybody moves away, and things just go away, and we don't want that to happen. So we see broadband and internet as part of our life force and part of the foundation that allows us to keep going. So here is a map of the coverage that we're doing for our tribal lands. If you look at the blue, well, this blue piece that comes out of Pawhuska is right here in the middle. I don't know if there's a, I can't show it, but right in the middle is Pawhuska. There's a blue line that comes out that goes to the west and then goes down, and then there's a purple line that goes up. Those two were part of our USDA RUS 2, I think it was, grants. We got like $3 million to build those. We got a lot of lessons learned out of building those two legs because that started in like 2015, and they are still building it today. So we're still working it. We've had a lot of stops, a lot of starts, a lot of change of personnel. It's been a big problem for us. But we're getting it done, we're getting there. We've been working with our funding agencies. And those two grants, actually, we have the government side and then we have the LLC. We have some LLCs that are more of our business leg. The LLCs were in charge of doing that. Since then, we have decided to just have the government go for the grants and administer the grants because we have a lot more control and we can put a lot more priority on what's going on. So from those two legs, we are also building everything else that you see up there. To the eastern border is Bartlesville. To the western border is Ponca City. Down at the southeastern border is Tulsa. So as you can see, our tribal land goes from Tulsa all the way up to Kansas, and then from Bartlesville all the way to Ponca City. To give you an idea of the scope of how large Osage County is, it's a little bit over 2,200 square miles. So we are putting in over 200 miles of fiber with just the NTIA grant that we received. So as you can imagine, 2 years, 200 miles in Rocky, Oklahoma, we've got our work cut out for us. The red circles that you see are towers that are either there or we're putting up 16 towers as well for coverage for areas that we can't necessarily get to fiber to the home, just straight fiber. But like I said, this is an enormous task. Our thinking here was, I was working with the director at the time, and we were trying to scope out what we were going to ask for, right? Because NTIA had come out and said, hey, tell us everything. So go, shoot for the stars, swing for the fences, tell us what you want, and we'll fund as much as we can. So we sat down and started thinking about, well, we were just going to see this bright blue tract. That's what we started off with as our initial thoughts, was just going from Pawhuska to Tulsa and having a line that goes through there, through some of our major cities. But I was like, well, they asked for it all, why don't we give it all to them? And so we came up with a plan that was based off of a feasibility study that we did back in 2013, which I highly recommend doing a feasibility study and having a plan going into any of this stuff. So we said, well, what would be the ideal for us to have? You know, we want to have, I'm going to use the wrong word, redundant loops, right? We want to have loops so that if anything should happen, we don't lose internet, right? And we want to make sure that we cover as much of Osage County as possible. So we took all of this stuff and we broke it into 13 different projects. So we said, okay, if they give us 5 million, this is what we're going to do. If they give us 10 million, this is what we're going to do. If they give us 15 million, because we had no idea how much we were going to get. So we kind of broke it up into chunks so that we would have an idea of what we could accomplish depending on what funding we got. We knew we were going to get some funding, we just didn't know how much. I think that was one of the better things that we did, was breaking those chunks up into different projects so that you can have a complete plan, and then based off whatever funding you do get, you can start building, but then when another funding comes up, you can build off of whatever you get, right? So that's what we did. And we presented that with NTIA. Of course, the USDA 3 grant came out before the funding came out for, or the decisions for the NTIA grant, the Tribal Broadband Grant. But we gave USDA the same plan and said, we've put in for NTIA, whatever we don't get from NTIA, this is what we plan on continuing with. And they were good with that. And then NTIA fully funded us. So we got 40.6 million to do this plan. And so what we've done, once we also got about 18 million from USDA through RUS 3. So we worked with the USDA folks, and now we're actually expanding on this to have another loop put in. We have a current casino near Bartlesville that they're building a new one. So we're looking at taking the old one and changing that into a data center for us. And so we're now going to run fiber to that, which has fiber coming in from Bartlesville, but now it's going to connect to our fiber as well. And that will give us another loop there to make sure that we don't lose connectivity for any of the households that we connect. I said feasibility study, I think, is a very important thing to do. It's very important to have a plan. The better plan you go in with, I feel the more successful you're going to be with the funding agencies, because you can tell your story better. And you can also have some engineering behind it and a feasibility study that says, hey, this is, this makes sense. And also you can take that to get tribal buy-in, which at least for us, I don't know about you guys, but it's not always the easiest thing to do. We get a lot of pushback on anything. Osages are not real fond of necessarily new things. Some of them aren't. Some are, but some aren't. So you get a lot of Facebook, posts that you have to be able to talk to and get the buy-in, because if you don't have the people behind you and if you don't have your government officials behind you, you're dead in the water, I feel. It makes it very difficult to move forward and be successful. So we used that feasibility study. We showed our plan to people. We let them understand that this is feasible, that it's going to help them, and what we're going to do. Also, one of the biggest things that I think that we are doing that we're doing well at the Osage Nation is usually technology and culture are a dichotomy, right? They're usually a lot of people see them at odds with each other, but we have taken it and we are using technology to strengthen our language and our culture and our sovereignty. what do I mean by that? Well, we're doing different things. We have a mobile app that has, our language on it, and it has orthography, and talks about our culture. Are you looking at it? We have also done some virtual reality stuff, right? Where the eventual goal is to be able to walk into a virtual world where you can sit down with one of our old chiefs like Chief Claremore or Chief Baconrine and have a conversation, right? And they could be telling you, you could be sitting there having, a conversation with one of our elders that's gone now. And that to me really preserves our culture, and that's using technology to help preserve our culture and our language, because they can speak to you in the language. We have it right now. We have some simple stuff to where you can go and set up a table correctly in the Osage manner. If you're going to do a formal Osage, meal, you can go in, and there's another one where you can go and play the drum and stuff like that. So there's just some neat stuff, and it's just constantly growing, and we're using technology, especially since COVID hit. It's so important for us to have connectivity, because now we're reaching out to any Osage, no matter where you live. You can now zoom in, right, to a language class. You could be we have some people that live in London, right, and they could still zoom in and learn the Osage language, right? But you have to have the bandwidth and the technology and the internet to do that stuff. So like I was saying, our first grants from USDA, RUS, were to go from Pawhuska to Gray Horse, and then Pawhuska to Bowring. We had a lot of lessons learned there. One of the things I would say is get your historical preservation and environmentals going as soon as possible. We ran into problems in Oklahoma. We had this beetle, the American burying beetle, that was on the endangered species list. So we had to set traps out and see if there were burying beetles along the way. And if you looked at that, the map here, if you notice, really, all of our middle mile stuff follows highways. So it's all current right away already. We still have to do all the historical preservation and the environmental studies, even though it's on that already disturbed right away. I'll talk when we get to the CARES Act stuff, but there were some other issues that I thought were just kind of weird. We had to do a historical preservation survey in a parking lot, which I wasn't real understanding, but it was a requirement, so we did it and, move forward. Like I said, we had a bunch of unexpected delays. Also in Osage County, there's a lot of spots where things are not marked very well. Gas lines, sewer lines. So we've had some issues. We had a whole town that said, look, you can go through the town aerial, but we're not letting you bury anything, because there are so many gas lines and we have no idea what's where, that we just know you're going to hit something. So, so you have to make adjustments along the way, and work with the funding agency to make sure that everything's okay with them. But what I've learned and what we have learned is that there's always a path forward, and the funding agencies want you to be successful, so they'll always work with you if you talk to them. So in 2020 is when COVID hit. So I joined the Osage Nation in 2019. So I had been there a year, and all of a sudden we're in COVID mode, which was a big eye-opener for me as being the operations manager for the IT department at the time. Now, our director of operations was retired Army, so his whole philosophy was, you have to be at work to be at work, right? So we didn't have really any telecommuting, we didn't have work from home, we didn't have any of that stuff. We were not set up for that really at all. I really commend my department, because when COVID hit and we had to send everybody home, it went almost seamlessly. I was just amazed at how the guys that worked for me did just such an amazing job getting everybody set up quickly, from having people on campus all the time to all of a sudden having nobody on campus. But we ran into issues. We had people that did not even have cell service at their house. So we had to figure out ways to get them connectivity so that they could connect and work from home. And so, once again, I think the whole nation and all of Indian country kind of went through that. And the government realized that we were hit pretty hard, so that's where these funds came out of, because they realized that we are technology deserts, and a lot of tribal lands are technology deserts, and we need to fix that. So the blessing is that we got funding that, like they said in the panel a couple of days ago, we're probably never going to see again. So we really need to take advantage of it. That's another reason I say have a good plan, because you don't want to miss out on this money. It's not going to come again, and it can be a game changer. So when COVID hit, we got some CARES Act funding, and I went to the director and I said, look, we've been having all these problems with this RUS, USDA grant, right? And it's been taking so long. I would like to take some of this CARES money and overbuild Pawhuska, just Pawhuska, with fiber. And so we went through a whole discussion, because if anybody remembers, we got the money in like June, and you had to have it done by December. So you're talking like 6 months, right? So we made some decisions that we would not do buried fiber. We would do, everything was going to be aerial. And so we actually got Pawhuska built out in 6 months. And one of the reasons that I really wanted to do that was to show everybody in our tribe and in our government, look, it can be done. Just give it to the people, the right people, and we will get it done. And we did, and it was amazing. And so now we have fiber, and we have free Wi-Fi in downtown Pawhuska that anybody can connect to. And like I said, it was amazing that we got it done in 6 months. So with that gave us the whole idea of swinging for the fences with the NTIA and USDA grants that came out, and coming up and saying, look, here's our whole plan. Here's how we expect to provide service to everybody, as many people as we can on our tribal land, right? And whatever you fund us, then we will break it up into, we had it all broken up into chunks, and whatever you fund us, we'll get that done, and we'll keep the next funding opportunity, we'll ask and continue funding, continue building. Like I said, we never expected to get the whole thing, and then we did. So when we did, everything fell into my lap as the IT director. So here I am, the guy running this IT department, and if anybody runs an IT department, you understand that it's a daily fight. It's a war, because there's always something breaking, there's always somebody that's not happy, there's always something going on. And according to everybody, if you plug it in the wall, it's IT, right? So I was like very overwhelmed, and I said, look, I may not be the smartest person in the world, but I am smart enough to know that I need help. So we reached out, and I said, what I want to do is I want to get a program manager. So the very first thing that we did was we hired somebody to be the program manager for the broadband program and manage the whole thing so that I could mainly focus on IT, and then this person would report to me and they would run the grants and that. So luckily we had a tribal member that has a doctorate in IT program management and project management. And so he applied for the job and we hired him, and that's Dr. Jim Trumbley, who is right now at the other conference speaking. And then from there I said, okay, well, we know that, well, not only me, but me and some other people, my team, we realized procurement's going to be a problem, all right? We know that this money's not just coming to us, it's going to everybody. So everybody's going to be fighting over resources for fiber, for contractors to do the work, for all this stuff. So we said, well, let's go ahead and hire somebody that we're going to put in procurement, right? But they're going to work for us only. So we're going to pay them, and we are their priority. And that way, we don't have to worry about trying to go through procurement and having them go, oh, well, this other, this other department, is a priority right now. We were told to go work for them and do their thing, especially with the 2-year commitment that we had from NTIA. We're like, we're not going to be able to handle any stops. So I would highly recommend having, if you can, have a procurement person that's just doing procurement just for you. Or having maybe your procurement department identifying somebody that you're the priority. We also hired a warehouse manager. That was another lesson learned that we learned from the previous grants. Stuff started to come in and they had nobody to receive it. So guess where it went? IT. Right? So all of a sudden I'm receiving all this equipment for this grant that was not my grant, and I'm trying to figure out who I'm supposed to talk to, where I'm supposed to put it, and all this stuff. So we designated an area and we hired a person to do the management of the warehouse so that we could also, since we have we have the 2 grants and we're looking at getting more, we can use economies of scale, right, and order things using economies of scale. We can keep everything very segregated, because at the end of the day you have to do your accounting, and this stuff went to this NTIA project, this went to USDA project, right? We have several different funding sources and projects, so it makes it a lot easier if you can have somebody that's going to do the accounting for that. Does that make sense? So those were the 3 hires that we did right off the bat. And then also we hired some project managers, one to run the middle mile portion and one to run the last mile portion. And the middle mile portion will also include the tower construction with the 16 towers that we're building as well. So that was another thing that we found that was important, was to have good project management. You need somebody leading the charge. And understanding what's going on in the daily, where you're going, where you're at, and driving it. So those were the biggest things that we have done as far as lessons learned, as far as the project management side of managing the grants. So the other thing is, the construction grants are one thing, where you're talking about middle mile and you're talking about, last mile going to the home. This is a picture of our groundbreaking where we just started. We're using ARPA funding to bring the last mile fiber to the home to our senior housing in Pawhuska. We will also be doing it in Fairfax. So the Osage Nation has 3 districts. We have the Pawhuska district, the Gray Horse district, which includes Fairfax, and then we have the Hominy district. The Hominy Senior Housing has not been started yet. They just finished with Fairfax, building Fairfax, senior housing in Fairfax. Pawhuska's been there for a while. Since we did the CARES Act build out of fiber in Pawhuska, we have fiber, so we're doing last mile there to the senior housing, and so they've started the work on providing that last mile to our seniors there. So there's thinking about the construction side. Our chief said, you know, we really should be, if we could, it would be nice to be able to do the construction ourselves. So we didn't have anybody who could do that. It was not a capability that we had. So we decided that we would create the capability. And we're starting with the final mile piece because it's a little bit less complex than the middle mile. So what we did was, using my history of being in the Navy, I worked in nuclear power, right? So if anybody has been in the military, very few people go into the military knowing the job that they're gonna do, right? I went into the Navy at 18. I did not know how to run a nuclear power plant, all right, at 18. The Navy does a very good job of taking people who do not have a skill but have the potential and the capability of learning a skill and teaching you that skill. So we used that model and we teamed with a local college, Tri-County Tech, and they went out and got a grant from the state that helped them build the curriculum. So we have a classroom phase where we've teamed also with our financial assistance program. So Native Americans and specifically Osages can apply, and we pick them up and we have a class, and then they go through a classroom phase through Tri-County Tech, and the financial assistance program pays them while they're going to school. And then we also teamed up with our contractor who's doing the construction, and they were gracious enough to allow us to have our folks that have gone through the classroom phase to now work with them and do hands-on training while they're constructing senior housing. So not only have we've taken somebody who does not have any knowledge in construction of fiber, we've given them the classroom phase, and now they're out there doing hands-on, actually laying fiber alongside people who have done this for years, and they're getting more training and they're getting more knowledge. The idea is at the end, they'll be qualified and certified to do it on their own. And then we will eventually take that piece and move it into the Osage Nation and just do it ourselves. To me, this is a big deal because I hear all the time people saying that we need to do more for our people. We need to do more for, you know, our Indian lands or you know, Native American, you know, lands there. And I don't see that we always give them a path, right? And I feel like this is at least one way that we're giving people from this area, local people, a path to a technical career, right? So they may not work for the Osage Nation forever. Hopefully we have enough, because we have a lot of homes that we're gonna have to hook up to keep them busy for a long time, and then hopefully we can, you know, have them help other nations out as well, and go do fiber for them. So once again, I think it's important for us to, if we're gonna bring our tribe up, we need to give them a path. And I feel like we're doing that with this. So like I said, our training partners is workforce development. They pay them while they're going to school, while they're doing all the training. And then the idea is once they're done with all the training, then we would, obviously since through the grant we can't make a profit, but we can, you know, recoup our costs and then have our people do the final mile for our grants. Does that make sense? have a couple of videos that I'd like to show you real quick.
My name is Charla Lockman. The fiber optics is going to do great, amazing things for Osage Nation, and it's going to be the future. And so I've taken some networking classes, and I think I could benefit, from this, and that the nation could benefit from what we got going on. The classroom training was good. All the instructors were very educational, helpful. The hands-on combined with the knowledge of the experienced people showing us and teaching us videos, it was really good. I think I'd like to finish a degree, and so I have some networking technology background and see where it leads me.
Today we're digging a drop over here at this second house to lay the orange conduit in that's going to carry the fiber, and we're going to dig that up, set it in place so that way when the fiber's ready we'll be able to lay it in.
What's been the most challenging part of being in the field?
Honestly, just the labor part of it, and it comes with it though. It's brand new and it seems exciting. And as soon as I got here, I liked the people that I was working with, so it made it just a lot better.
So we are very excited about the future. This is the broadband team here. The other position that I failed to mention earlier is we also hired a data analyst, which I think, at least for us, is very important because Osage County is a hodgepodge. There's people that own property that are Osages. There are people that own property in Osage County on our tribal lands that are Native American but not Osages, and then we have people that own property on our tribal land that are not Native at all. So with the NTIA grant for tribal broadband, one of the stipulations is that you can only hook up Native American households. And so while we were doing the grooming for our grant, one of the questions is, how many households are you going to be able to service in this area? And we had no clue. So we had to go out and get that data and try to figure it out because we didn't have like a census of our county or anything like that, of who lives where. And then of course, people move, but we could at least get them an idea. So there's gonna be tons of data points that I feel like we're gonna need throughout the administration of these grants, and keeping all the data segregated into the proper places. So that's another thing that I would recommend, is having somebody that can do data analysis for you. So some of the grants that we've also applied for, of course, USDA Reconnect 4, the BEAD program, the Middle Mile grant, and the Digital Equity program with NTIA. Those are all grants that we're looking at in the future, or that we've applied for as well. We've also applied for the BIA. There's a BIA grant out that is specifically for doing feasibility studies. So if it hasn't closed yet, I would highly recommend looking at that if you haven't done a feasibility study. We're going after it so that we can update our feasibility study, because the last one that we did was like in 2013. And so that's a long time ago in fiber years, right? Or in IT years, right? So we want to update our feasibility study so that when we apply for stuff, we're using the most current information. Does anybody have any questions?
I want to commend you on that presentation. Sounds like you're doing a lot of great work.
Appreciate it. It's a lot of
Okay.
hard work. We have a great team, I tell you.
Yeah. So I have a list here, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So, because we're all learning from each other, we're all at different stages. It might be planning, it might be build out, it might be, just securing internet service from a provider. So the 2015 grant that you said is still in action 8 years later.
Yes.
I want to hear about some of the reasons why the stops and start and the hindrances to those, so we can expect and anticipate challenges and how to overcome that.
Gotcha. So part of it was when, and please understand this was what I call BB, before Bill, because I got to the nation in 2019, so I'm going off of what people have told me, because I wasn't there. But the original grant, we were teaming with our LLC, and our LLC has had a changeover of leadership and stuff, and so they weren't really driving it. And that's why I say that having a project manager and a program manager, somebody that's driving the effort, is so important, because things were not being driven and they were not being proactive. I don't want to say just the LLC, but in general, we were not being proactive about stuff. There was a lot of learning curve for us because we've never done anything like this before. The environmentals and the historical preservation surveys, we had a lot of stops and starts with those. We had a lot of, part of the other problem was I felt like we had too many cooks in the kitchen, right? Too many people stirring the broth. So that was another thing that we did with these current grants, was we tried to keep the team fairly small and smaller, but having still important players. We had a core group, because with that one, the group was really big, and so you had all these opinions that came in, and we had to, we felt like we had to appease all the questions and stuff. Does that make sense? And so it took a lot longer than it really needed to. We just needed a core team that was going to drive it and get it done, and go to the authoritative source, right, for the questions that we had and get those answered. And I mean, there was times that we waited and waited and waited, for answers for stuff. Does that answer your question?
It does. So
Okay.
basically, you need program management and someone that's leading the charge
Definitely.
on top of every task.
Yes, definitely.
Excellent.
And somebody that has the authority to do that, right? It's very important that we resource somebody who has the authority to make decisions and stuff, so they're not constantly being micromanaged, or having to answer upper leadership, that leadership has their back. Does that make sense? I hope.
So for the underground method, did you guys trench, micro-trench, rock saw, combination of all?
Yes, I think it was a combination of all of it, because that was another thing that we didn't really, we knew that Osage County was rocky. We didn't know that it was as rocky as it is. So that was another place. Once they started construction, they had a lot of starts and stops, was with hitting rock. So our plan now for the current grants is, we hit a good portion of rock, we'll just go aerial, and then get past the rock and then go back down underground as we can.
So being that there's heavy mineral in that state, did you not have geology reports or some kind of combination of those studies?
Yes, that's all part of our DNR team that did all that stuff.
Nice. I wanted to add to your point about needing data and the importance of that, whether it's the number of households, the ones that don't have, connectivity, or they don't have devices. So that's one thing I think that a lot of tribes struggle with, is having those metrics so you can support your application. So I would encourage everybody to start gathering that data, from school districts, from whoever that is.
Definitely, and also to dovetail on that, I want to say either USDA, I think the USDA has some data, but the speeds that people have in their area, that's another thing that you need to know, because there's a cutoff with them being able to support your grant as to whether somebody is underserved or not served at all. And so we found that all of Osage County is either underserved or not served. So it made it very easy for us to go and just say, hey, look, we're just doing it all. But you need to look at the areas to make sure that they fall within the requirements. And it's just one household in that area that is underserved or not served. That's all you need, as far as I understand it. So it's not like you have to have everybody that way.
I saw a couple of pictures of communications towers, and in California, especially in our area, we deal with energy resiliency and constant power shutoffs. So I was wondering how you address backup energy, whether that's backup solar, however you do that on your connectivity.
So that's a question that I don't think we have answered right now. And I'm glad you bring that up, because we'll have to look at that. I know that, speaking from, and I'm glad you asked that question, because it really made me remember one of the things I wanted to talk about, which is with the towers, getting land for the towers. Because you need to make a decision whether you're going to lease it or buy it or anything like that. And remember the whole story I talked about with the head rights and what makes Osage's, different. We had people asking for ridiculous stuff when we were trying to buy an acre of land from them to put a tower on. And that's another thing I would suggest, is either using a straw man to buy the land or something like that, because they heard the Osage Nation was trying to buy it. And we had people asking for a head right. We had somebody ask for $1 million per acre. It was just ridiculous, the asks that came out. So that was a part that was another setback for us, was being able to get the land that we needed to build the towers for the current USDA grants. But I saw that, I think you were talking about y'all have solar, and that's another thing, is when you're looking at the land that you're going to put towers on, is there a road to it? Do you have to make a road? What kind of land are you looking at? We're trying to put as many towers on tribal land. What I mean by that is land that the tribe owns as possible, so that we don't have to mess with all the realty stuff and everything like that. And like I said, I would look at lease or buy or whatever's going to be best for you. And then also you need to make sure that there's power nearby, if you're going to run power to it, or have some kind of power source, and then redundancy with power as well. So
on those towers, are you guys considering like the cellular companies? Are you building that at those standards?
Yes, definitely. Once again, so kind of to go back to the dream portion, right, that this all started with a dream, I feel that we at the Osage Nation are a little bit too dependent on gaming revenue and grants. And so we need to diversify our revenue streams for our tribe, because you just never know when those two things are going to go away. Those are not in our control. Those are in somebody else's control. We need to have businesses that are generating revenue that are under our control, in my opinion. So having those towers and being able to lease those towers to sell agencies and stuff like that and other, places, I think is a good revenue stream for us. And I would highly recommend it for other tribes as well. So yes, we took that in consideration, as well as selling dark fiber, or renting and selling dark fiber, to other agencies and stuff.
And even a consideration is like if you had a small hut, it's like that rack space as well. That's, important real estate. Just two more questions.
Sure.
And so how are you addressing the security issues, like with essential infrastructure? Like, are you guys installing cameras or, some kind of security systems?
That's another one I don't know the answer to. That's a good question. because the towers that we currently have just have like a fence around them. I don't think there's like any cameras or anything like that. So it's just a locked fence. And that's probably not good enough.
Yeah, the reason I'm saying that from experience, because a fence is only as good as you know, the person
as
is.
high as it is.
Right, and so we're trying to incorporate, wireless cameras at least on every site so we can have that level of protection. And then obviously when the data is built to that tower, you'd have connectivity and transmission, but it's something you have to consider, and we're just dealing with that as well. And the last point I wanted to make is when you mentioned the apprentice program, because we did the exact same thing with one of our builders, is that we had our tribal member staff kind of shadow them, go up to their facility, learn, the splicing, how to install a pole. They did some trenching, they laid conduit, the hand holes, all of that. So I think that's a great thing to mention is the apprentice program and writing that into the contract if you're using an outside firm.
I'm very happy that you guys are doing that too, and I'm glad that we're not the only ones who thought of that, because I think those type of programs are what's going to elevate our tribes. We can't just say, oh, you should go get a job in web development without having a path to learn web development. I think we need to give those opportunities there, and I'm glad that you guys are doing it too, and I hope others are as well.
Last one, sorry, then I won't
Sure.
bogart the mic anymore. When you mentioned that on your map that you were building along the highways and you said there's an existing right-of-way, so did that alleviate the need for landowner consent? Did you have to deal with DOT or the state on that, or how did that work?
So we are working with the Department of Transportation, and that's a very good point. Thank you again for sparking another topic. We had to work with ODOT, which is Oklahoma Department of Transportation, because they're doing a lot of road construction, and they're renovating a lot of the roads in Osage County. So we had to plan our fiber installation along with their construction, right? So we didn't want to go put fiber in and then have them dig it all up 2 months later because they're putting a road in there. So we teamed with them, or we collaborated with them so that we were, in concert with each other instead of fighting with each other. As far as yes, it does make it to where we don't have to ask as far as land ownership. Now, with the towers, if the tower's on, somebody's land, we have to go through somebody else's land. And I think there's a couple of spots where we are going to have to veer off of that right away, so we're going to need to get the owner's permission as well, but we have mainly stayed away from that, luckily, because there's a lot of roads already there, and it just kind of made sense for that middle mile to follow those highways.
Thanks, Bill.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Well, I hope that everybody found this beneficial. I said it's our story. It's not necessarily the right way to do it or the best way, but it's the way that we've gone through. And hopefully I have brought up a couple of, tripwires that you may run into that you may not have thought of before. So that you can get ahead of it, because I believe in being proactive instead of reactive. Oh, good. Yes, please.
Okay. Hi. I was wondering if you had any takeaways from the grant process. It seems like maybe you were even more successful than you expected in receiving the grants. So were you involved in the process of submitting that? Did you guys, did your nation do it completely in-house or contract out for part of it, things like that?
So the Osage Nation is fortunate enough to have our own grants department. I know that not every tribe has that, but we do. And so our grants department was very instrumental in making sure that we, our applications were going to be the best they could be. But also along with that, I feel like the biggest thing is telling your story. Right? If you can, I felt like we came in to NTIA and said, look, if you give us this funding, here's our plan. here's what we're going to do, you know, and here's how we're going to spend it. And we've got it broken up into chunks so that if you only give us so much, we still have a plan, right? So telling that story and showing them the plan, the person that I took over as director, his name is Mark Kirk. He worked for AT&T for many years, just a brilliant guy. He really came up with the engineering side, and I mean, we had it down to, you know, the T on, you know, what we needed as far as towers and fiber and this many strands, and, you know, all that. He had a spreadsheet just that had everything that you could think of. So the more detailed plan you can give to the funding agency that shows that you've really thought it through, I think the better your chance is going to be to get funded. Does that answer your question? Okay. Well, if there's nobody else, I really, really thank you for your time. I was very nervous, so thank you for putting me at ease. And here's my contact information. I really believe that those of us that are going through this broadband journey, we need to have a collaboration and be able to reach out to each other so that, you know, everybody's got great ideas, and people are going to think of stuff that we didn't think of. We're going to think of stuff that other people didn't think of. And so myself and Dr. Trumbley and our whole teams, we're very big on collaboration, and we would love to hear from you guys. We'd love to, you know, work with anybody that wants to work with us, and, you know, because if we all bring each other up, then it's only great for Indian country altogether. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill.